particular painful moment, well, you actually saying all positive things, but I had a slightly painful moment when I thought what the ratio in my life between the activities I've invested in that will give me a one-time return versus the activities I've done that give me, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say it, 100 times return or 1,000x return in terms of how often you'll get the result back. I just was like, I don't want to spend another minute working on linear. Just get up, you give that hour, you get that result. I want to try and work out how I can change the ratio more and more, where you're taking one-time decision. It makes everything afterwards easier. It opens up possibilities that weren't there before.
This is an episode that I recorded several years ago with one of my favorite authors, Greg McKeown. And the reason I want to bring it back is I think it's really timeless. He had just released his book, Effortless, and we sat down for a quick interview to talk about what that means and how we can make things more effortless. And, you know, especially in this crazy time that we're in now where things seem to be very complicated, very difficult, sometimes it's worth taking a step back and thinking about how could we make this effortless? How could we make the decisions we're making easier? Anyway, this was a great episode. I actually got into some psychology with me, which was kind of fun, but I hope you enjoy. And here's the interview with Greg McKeown.
The limited partner shares in the potentially outsized returns of a well-planned and executed investment, but as a passive investor, and has the maximum leverage on their most precious asset, their time. And that is why we're here together. 90% of the millionaires out there built their net worth with real estate. However, 0% of the billionaires are hands-on managing the real estate assets because there simply isn't enough time. My name is Jake Wiley, and for the past 16 years, I've been investing in real estate, and I've learned a thing or two. But the most important lesson is how to leverage the expertise and time of others to maximize your investment potential. Welcome to the Limited Partner Podcast.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining me today. I've had the opportunity, and I appreciate you giving me an advanced copy of Effortless. Yeah, I read Essentialism. I've read Effortless. I can't wait to get into the conversation today, but you know, one, I know that you've got the book launch coming up. That's really important. There's a lot going on in your world. So one, thanks for making the time. But, you know, two, why don't you tell us a little bit about the book launch, when we can get it and where we can get it?
Well, no, I appreciate that, Jake. It's great to be with you. Yeah, Effortless is a passionate project for me because of what everybody's going through right now. I was talking to a CEO of a large tech company, and he literally just summarized it. He said, everyone's burned out. And here we are, more than a year into COVID at the time of our conversation. And it doesn't matter what your status was before, you have used up internal reserves to be able to make it through this year. If you're a solo entrepreneur, you've had to, likely, you have hustled to pivot your business or just to keep it going while you've got new challenges. Maybe you've dealt with home education, you've dealt with, for sure, more uncertainty than before. And even if you have a team, same thing. There's a whole set of stresses and pressures that means for them and for everyone. In an environment where everybody's burned out, what you don't need to do is try to just double down on what you've done previously. And a lot of people think that's what they need to do. And really Effortless is an attempt at trying to share some practices and principles I learned through actually the most agonizing experience of my life, you know, how we can make it a bit easier to do what matters most. And I mean, people can, you know, it's available at the time of their listening to this. It will be out, maybe just barely out, 27th of April, and people can get it everywhere that they get their books. And just finished the audio for it, so it's going to be available in audio as well. I read it. Don't know if that's a good idea. Sorry, might have been better not to, but there it is. It's been done for good or ill, and I'm just delighted to be with you and to be sharing this with people because I think it has the power of relevancy right now.
That's great. So by the time you're hearing this, the book is out. Amazon, Audible, everywhere that you can get books, it's out there for you. So I guess let's take a step back into the past, right? So you started this journey with Essentialism. And yeah, we can get into that because I love that book too. But one, I guess, how did Essentialism start? You know, how did you get the courage or the moxie to go out there and write this book?
And then two, I guess the follow-on question is, like, how does that lead into Effortless?
Yeah, I mean, there is a personal journey that connects it all together. I mean, the key moment when looking back, that Essentialism was born was when I got an email from my boss at the time, said, look, Friday between 1 and 2 p.m. would be a very bad time for your wife to have a baby because I need you to be at this client meeting. I mean, she was expecting, so, otherwise that'd be an even stranger email to receive. But nevertheless, Friday, we're in the hospital. Our daughter's been born in the early hours, or the middle of the night. And instead of being focused on what was clearly the most essential thing in that moment, what the priority was, I felt torn. I've got my laptop out, my phone out. I'm trying to keep everyone happy. I'm trying to do it all, do both. And so to my shame, I went to the meeting, and I mean, even afterwards, I remember my manager saying, look, the client will respect you for the choice you just made. And I'm not sure that they did, I'm sure they did. I'm not sure the look on their faces evinced that sort of respect. But even if they did, it is clear in hindsight that I made a fool's bargain, that I violated something much more important for something much less important. And that was sort of the birth of this, is why do we act in this way? And what can we do to be able to take responsibility for the prioritization of our life? What I learned from the experience was really this, that if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And so it's been the listening, it's been like an unparalleled multi-year listening tour since Essentialism came out, to be able to speak with literally thousands of people, tens of thousands perhaps now, about what really is essential to them and what gets in the way, what makes it hard for them to live their life around the things that they believe and state that they believe are the most important things in their life. And so that's been a remarkable opportunity, and it's also come itself with new lessons.
I love, one of the things that you do really well in both of the books, right, is you tell this personal story of how it connects for you. And it really resonated, Essentialism actually resonated with me on the first one, where you tell the story about having to make this choice and you made the wrong choice.
Yeah.
And I've done it myself, right? We have twin daughters. They were born premature. And as a result, their lungs developed late. Mm-hmm. And one of them caught a really bad cold and we had to go to the hospital. Was in the hospital for a week. And the most important thing was being there for my daughter. Yet I was over in the corner, taking calls and trying to, keep up and make people feel like, oh, no matter what, Jake's going to be there for us.
Right.
And it just, it's one of those things. It's like a tuning fork, right? It just resonated with me, where it's like, you're right. I totally made the wrong choice and I put the wrong things in the wrong order. And it just made me really think about that. And then, let's flash forward to Effortless. Mm. Tell a similar story where, okay, you've gone through this essentialism, you know what's important, right? You defined it. And then you found that you were still working yourself to death. And you question, why is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was traveling, one of the entrepreneurs I was working with raised this idea of, and we've heard it before, the big rocks theory. And really, this is a pretty good summary of essentialism. In the big rocks theory is, if you take a container and you put in the sand first, and then you put the small pebbles in, and then the big rocks, it doesn't fit. It's a geometric problem, right? It just doesn't fit if you do it that way. If you take the same size container, but you change the order, you put the big rocks in first, then the small rocks, then the sand, then it fits. And it's a metaphor because the big rocks are, looking after yourself, protecting the asset that is you. It's looking after the most important relationships of your life. It's making trade-offs between projects so that you can pursue just the few that you think will be the highest contribution that you can make. And that's the idea, and that's the logic flow. But they got to a point in my life where I thought, I still believe this, but I could see some cracks in the theory. I could experience it. I could feel it. I was being more selective than I'd ever been. I wasn't writing another book for a start, but you're supposed to write one every 18 months, especially if the book is successful, the last book you did is successful, then it opens up all the doors. It's just ready. People are ready to go. But I was not doing that. I had stopped teaching put on hold the class I was co-created at Stanford, the D school there, Designing Life Essentially. I mean, I loved doing that, but, put that aside. There's a workshop business. There's a demand for that. Nope, we're not going to do that. I mean, these are fairly major career, selectivity where you're saying no and keeping it aside. But still, it felt like, there's still, let's put it in the metaphor. What do you do if there are too many big rocks?
Right.
That's a different kind of problem. And in the midst of thinking about that, I have a family crisis that comes up we can talk about later, but that just suddenly pushes it all over the edge. And you say, okay, to go forward, I have only a few choices. I can either drop some of the big rocks, right? You say it's essential, but I'm still not doing it. We're not going to invest in that relationship, not going to invest in your health, not going to invest in these important projects that you want to make a contribution or even just provide for your family and so on. Like, you could get rid of those, or you've got to find another way. If you're dealing with what's only essential and you're already working as hard as you can and it's not enough, then you've got to find an easier, different, better way. And that pursuit and dealing with that multi-year family crisis was the opportunity to discover that it isn't just about whether you're doing the right things. It's, are you doing it in the right way? And I found that there was tremendous opportunity there where, I found myself feeling a bit like, I don't know, like a weightlifter who's lifting with his back, or a baker who's kneading everything by hand.
Right.
You suddenly discover that there's a different way. What if there's a better way? What if there's an easier way to go about the things that are essential? And that has been, that's unlocked a whole new mindset, a whole new skill set that I think can be really beneficial.
Yeah, you talk about it in the book, and I think this is worth discussing if you're willing. It's really like flipping the mindset and like asking the question a different way. Would you mind sharing that?
Well, there's several opportunities in the book for this, but one that I think just right from the start, an effortless inversion. Most of us ask questions, but the questions are back in the back of our head. We're not really conscious of the questions we're asking. And so it's like there's this perpetual Google search going on, and it's giving us answers, and we're reading the answers if there's no question, as if this is just what is.
Yep.
And so, for example, for the hit squad, which was what one of my brothers, Justin, refers to this, is the hardworking, intelligent, talented group of people, right? That's the hit squad. For that group of people, they tend to say, well, look, if I want better results, if I want to double my results as an entrepreneur, well, it's obvious I have to just double my work ethic.
Right.
If I put in double the hours, if I put in, more effort, that's how I'll get better results. And there's a certain fairness inherent in that idea. But really what I have found is that effort and reward are not linearly related. That is, you've got to unlock them. One way to unlock them, the fastest way, and it's so simple, it almost will feel too simple, but it's just to ask a new question. And this is the question: what if this could be effortless?
Right.
So let's just put these two books together. So Essentialism is like rethinking prioritization. Effortless is rethinking, simplification.
Right.
And you can ask two questions right now. Everybody listening this, watching this, can ask these two questions. What is something that is incredibly important, essential? Actually, Jake, you could do it right now. You game? We just go live on this. We'll do it right now.
We're going to do it right now.
I want you to answer this question, yes?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. What is something essential to you? It's very important. You know that if you did it, it would be a game changer for you. I mean, it would really move the needle. You know, it would, man, that would be amazing if I could get this thing done.
Right.
You're not doing it yet, but what comes to mind? What's the first thought?
So honestly, the first thought is it's my health, right?
Okay.
And it's, what do I eat? Right.
Okay.
Is that a fair way to do it?
Perfectly fine answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So what that tells me, what I sort of carry from that story is that you'd like to eat better. That's the obvious. But I also sense in the way you said it, like, I've been wanting to do this for a while.
Yep.
Like, I'm a bit frustrated about this because it's not like information gap. Look, if I eat a bit healthier, if I eat a lot healthier, my life is a lot better. Can you put in your own word just for a second why that matters so much to you? You said it was essential. You said it was a game changer. Why does it matter so much to you to solve this?
It matters because I know that if I make a simple change in what I do, and then really most importantly, the decisions that I make, and then when I make those decisions, I can live a much better life, right? I can have more energy. I can have more time during the day. Like, there's just so much more that I can do by taking control of what I eat.
Okay, so you said, what you told me was energy and time. You're like, my life gets better, and the specifics you said were energy and time. Why does that matter to you? Like, what is it you are, if you can eat better, what does it lead to? What is the thing that you just feel like, it would just make this so much better, more enjoyable, more achievable? What? Beyond the energy and time. Like, go deeper. Why?
So I have 4 children.
Okay.
And, I put in a lot of effort every day into work.
Yep.
And typically, like, when I wind down, I'm pretty much done. Like, we do dinner and like we do that, but I don't have the energy levels that I want to be able to engage with my kids and my family at as much as I could. Like, am I outside throwing the ball as much as I should? No, right? Am I just hanging out and just trying to like recuperate from the day? Yes. Yeah. That's why it's important to me.
Yeah. What you just told me, and I think everybody listening to this can sympathize with this because this is a very COVID kind of challenge as well, is that by the end of the workday, there's nothing left to give. You go to say, my most important people in my life don't get very much from me. Not compared to how much I wish was there, not compared to how much I even feel for them. But when you go to feel, you try to live out that value. It's not that you don't value it even. It's just that there isn't any energy left.
That's it.
So the gap isn't a gap of intent. It's not of motivation. It's not even of effort. It's energy gap. There's not enough energy to do what I actually value. This is what I hear you saying.
You got it.
Give me one level more why it matters. Like, why does having energy for your children, for your wife, for your family, why does that matter so much to you?
So, great question. We're going deep here. I thought I was asking the questions today, but thank you. When I think about my legacy, right? It's interesting. So I turned 40 in a week. So by the time this podcast is out, I'll be 40. And that's a number that makes you kind of reflect a little bit.
Yes.
And when I think about the legacy that I want to leave for my kids, is really to show them what's possible. It's easy to just get caught up in the day-to-day activities and just do it. But what's truly possible in life if you really go after it? And what I noticed is that if I don't have the energy, I'm not living that, right? I'm not exuding, the legacy that eventually that I want them to look and be like, wow, Dad did it. He was great to us. He was out there talking to people. He did some amazing things. Like, so can we. And that's, may call it a midlife crisis, but it's become really obvious lately that it's so important for me to like take control of my life before, it just keeps going the way it's going.
Yeah. You've just identified two deeper points still. You called it legacy, but you're talking about, it's not just how you're remembered. It's completing a mission.
Yep.
Fully. Is I have a mission. One, I want to really kill it with my children. I mean, I just want them to know, man, they were the most important thing. And he was here for me, and there was time for me. And he laughed with me and played with me and had memories together and all of that richness. That is vital to you. And two, you want to make a contribution that kind of makes them proud, that gives them a sense of what's possible for their life, that they go, you know what, he showed us how to live. He showed us that he loved us, but he also showed us how to live, how to make a contribution in the world that can inspire me, you know, for my whole life, and I can pass it on and so on. So these are like, we're not talking about now peripheral values. We're talking about the very heart of it. Yes?
Yes. We should do this more often.
All right. This is all under what I would call question one. I know I asked a few questions, but it's still in category one. The question I asked at the beginning was what's essential, that's just vitally important, that would make all the difference. You've explained us why it matters and so on. Now, the second category, and there's only two categories, is really this question. How can we make it effortless?
Right.
How can we make this goal effortless for you? Let me just go through a few sort of sub-questions for you.
Sure.
One, what does done look like? Like, how do you know when you're not, I don't mean, oh, I'm perfect on food, I'm perfect on, I mean, it's really about energy. It's not just food, but let's go back to food because it's the one you started with.
Yep.
What would success look like? How would you know when you're going, hey, listen, I'm not perfect, but I feel good about it now? Give me it as specifically as possible.
Okay. You're probably going to chew this one up too, but if it was planned and ahead of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to think about it. Yeah, and I think the point about it is that when left to make a decision at a poor decision-making, time in my day, I make the wrong decision.
Mm-hmm.
But I would know ahead of time if it's like, hey, here's the meals. They're planned out. They're done. I don't even have to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. I really like that. You'd know. It's like a double effortless answer, actually, because what you're saying is I would know that I was making progress because I wouldn't even have to think about this.
That's exactly right.
A primary form of effort, but what we mean by that word, we think we know what we mean when we say that, but really the more tangible description of effort is mental exertion. And when you have to think about something, that's effort. And the key, there's nothing wrong with effort at all. I'm in favor of effort, but it's a limited resource. You've only got so much of it. And so this is why by the time we get sometimes to like 11 o'clock in the day, we're in such decision fatigue, right? Just a different word for being exhausted, right? We just used up our effort in making decision after decision after decision. And so then, of course, by the time maybe it's not 11, maybe it's by the time it's 2, you haven't eaten, and you go, okay, well, I'm eating something.
Yep.
And that something is probably, you can correct me, it's probably fast food, or it's probably, that's what's available. That's easy in that moment. And so you go for something else that's not actually healthy, isn't actually good for you. This sound about right?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a house full of 4 kids under the age of 10. Like the food that's sitting around is not ideal for me.
What you're saying is, there's a lot of easy food.
Yep.
That's at hand, but it isn't the great food for you. Okay, so I think we have it. It's in terms of that answer, and that is that the meals are planned ahead. You don't have to think about it.
That's it.
It's done. It is. It's going to be there. You know what it is in advance, and you're fine to eat that. But you don't want to wait until you're hungry to then be thinking and looking in the fridge and looking in the freezer and seeing what's around and then just eating whatever that is. That's what I hear from you.
Yep.
Let me just put the big question back to you for a second. Like what? Well, no, I'll break it down here. What is the first obvious thing that you need to do to start moving towards this solution? Like, you've got a basic solution there. I can visualize that with you. I know what that looks like, but try and work back with me to the very first obvious step. Because a lot of people, when they're trying to achieve something that's been hard for them in the past, hasn't happened yet, think about the 50 steps involved, or even the 10 steps involved, and it just is overwhelming enough. Yeah, okay, I can't get back to that. I got to get to the next email. I got to do the next task. And I just want to say, forget step 10 or 10,000. What's the first obvious step you can take? What's your thought on that?
Well, now that we're really thinking about it, it's probably finding a meal delivery service that already has food prepped.
Okay. So so is that, if we just stopped this conversation right now, could you do that? What would you do? What would you actually do next?
Google search.
Right.
Meal delivery services for keto, right? That's my...
Right. So we now have the first task, right? The first task is open Google and search for meal delivery service.
Yep.
I mean, we're actually pretty close right there.
Yep.
To at least illustrate what we're talking about here.
Yep.
Know what is essential. We know why it matters. And then we move to the second theme and the focus of this book, which the new book is, how do you make it effortless?
Yep.
Don't think that that the more important the thing is, the harder it has to be.
Yep.
Lots of people have that basic premise. What you're offering here is one tiny first first action. You know how to do it. The only thing I want to add really right now about this is one of my favorite ideas that came from the research for the book is called a microburst, which is that you literally set a timer for 10 minutes.
Okay.
And at the end of it, so you know the first action, but you also know the first action isn't the whole solution. We all know that. So you say, okay, I know what the very first obvious action is. Got that. And we know what success looks like. We've got that. I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. At the end of 10 minutes, I'm done with this for today. We're okay. What can I get done, starting with that first obvious action, within 10 minutes? It's a microburst. And I love microburst because, what can you achieve within 10 minutes on this? What do you think is the answer to that, by the way? We've got first obvious action, but what can you achieve in 10 minutes on this goal?
I mean, honestly, I think, assuming that we could probably solve this problem. I actually think that in 10 minutes of searching, with a little bit of review reading, I could find a meal delivery service that meets my needs, then I put my credit card in, and this thing would show up at my door at some point in the very near future. I think all of that's possible in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think it might be. I mean, if you had to reduce that goal, you could just say, literally, I have found it and I've put my credit card in.
Yep.
And so I've achieved that part of it. And I know that there's one more microburst, which is maybe selecting the food for this week.
Correct.
I wouldn't worry about trying to solve it forever, unless it really is natural for you to do that, and you can, fine. But I mean, I love that you are willing to do that. Thank you for being willing and being vulnerable enough to do it and to have an unusual kind of podcast conversation to get there. What you just said at the end to me is priceless. I mean, you literally said, I think we could do it. I think I could solve it in 10 minutes.
Yep.
Let me just ask you, how long have you been thinking about the problem?
I don't know, 20 years? Seriously?
Right?
Yeah.
I have things like that, by the way. I don't want to sound at all one up about this conversation because I happen to have been having the coaching conversation. There are things still in my life now that I cannot believe I have lived with for so long.
Right.
And this is not unusual what you're saying, that people will have something that bothers them for literally 20 years or sometimes longer.
Yep.
And when you actually use the effortless question and a few little questions, what does done look like? What's the first obvious action? And what can you do within the first 10 minutes microburst? Man, it's so liberating. You take it all from the vague, from the overwhelming. And so it's not always that people are working so hard and get exhausted and give up. There's a different kind of problem we often have with the essential activities in our life. And it's that we think something is going to be overwhelming.
Yep.
And it's a bit like, if somebody's doing a slide presentation and they have like 500 words on the slide, we don't read 400 words and give up. You do the pre-scan. You're like, am I ever going to read that? No, I'm never going to read that.
Right.
And the same for many of the essential activities in our lives. We think, I really need to eat better. Am I ever going to do all those things all that stuff that I think that's going to require? No, I'm never going to do it. And we give up so then we're in this very awful state of like, I've jumped to something else that I perceive as easier, but I feel guilty for not having done the thing I had. And it goes on and on for years and years with that burden. When you can just dismantle the false assumption that essential things have to be hard, have to be overwhelming. And the fastest way I know, as I said, is a summary question is, how can this be effortless? Right. Just asking the question releases answers. And we've just obviously had an example of that here. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, it's like, here's one of the things I loved about the book too, is that not only, most of the books that I read, there's a lot of thought that goes into it, right? And then you're like, oh, you do this, and it's like an exercise. And you got to like, all right, I'm going to put the book down. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do this. It's going to take 20 minutes. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep reading, right? Like I just, let me get what's next. You have some like charts in your book that's like, here's some examples of some effortless thing. Like auto pay your bills, like don't deal with that every month. I know like that just seems super obvious, but like you gave enough examples that literally while I was reading the book, I just went in and wrote like, what are a bunch of things that I do every day, or, once a month, or that repeat that are just annoying. Mm-hmm. And here's another example, like, and you'll appreciate this because it's already happened. Every day I wake up, and I have to like go work out, and then I figure out like, what am I going to wear? Right. And I got a closet, and I've got, blue shirts, and I've got check shirts, and I've got all these different things. And I sat down and I was like, well, could I make that easy? Like this is the whole Mark Zuckerberg thing where he wears the hoodie every day. I was like, like I'm not that cool. Like I can't get away with wearing a sweater every day. But I was like, well, I looked at my closet and I was like, you know what? I could wear a white button-up shirt every day. It works, right? Like a white collar shirt works every single day. If I wore a blue shirt, but I'm like, golly, man, you wear that blue shirt a lot. Nobody's ever mentioned that I wear this white shirt every day. And they're always like, oh, you're dressed up for COVID. And I was like, yeah, I don't even think about it anymore. And I mean, that's so empowering. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have to think about it.
I love that example. I love that you did that because again, people sometimes think, oh, I've got to make a huge change to make something that makes a difference. And it's not true. If we identify the things we do often and make those things a little easier. So let me just put that conceptually in place for those that haven't had a chance to read Effortless yet. Which is everyone listening to this, right out the gate, because it just came out, I think, the day this will launch. There's 3 concentric circles in the effortless model. Effortless state is the beginning. We need to be physically rested. We need to try to rid ourselves of all of this, the anxious state, the exhausted state, the frustrated state, the worried state. Just keep coming back to this moment, to this, to being able to be in this moment, try and clear off the rest, this effortless state. Effortless action is what starts to follow naturally. That is, you're trying to do the minimum amount of effort to get the result that you're looking for. But then the third and final circle is effortless results. And effortless results, for me personally, I think is the biggest single takeaway for the research process. Effortless results isn't just getting a result effortlessly. What I think of it as the difference between linear results, that is, you do something once and get a result once. That's just what you're saying, right? In the closet. Every day you go in there, make a decision once. And it doesn't seem like a big decision, but it takes up a piece of your energy to have to think about that each day. Versus a residual result, which your example is great for. You've made the decision once, and now you never have to think about it again. Every day it works for you. It makes that thing easier forever afterwards. The difference between linear results and effortless results, the difference between the power of perpetual results flowing to you. I mean, as an entrepreneur, this is it. This is the big breakthrough. There's life before you start investing in residual results, and there's life afterwards. And I think they're not even, it's like a completely different status. The most successful entrepreneurs are not, the billionaire is not working 1,000 times harder than you.
That's right.
But forget all that you've heard about the hustle culture and you hustle your way to the top and that's how you're going. I'm not saying you don't have to work to achieve your goals. I'm just saying the people that are getting it, the people that are blowing it up, they're not working that much harder because you can't work that much harder. You can work harder than someone else. Of course you can. There's a real limit on the benefits of it. At some point you start to have, you start to get even negative results. You get to the point where you're working so hard, you burn yourself out and you still aren't getting the results you want. I remember thinking distinctly about this as someone who cares about teaching and wants to make a bigger impact and so on. That I'm in the same struggle. And I thought years ago, I was like, yeah, Oprah doesn't work. She doesn't work 1,000 times harder than the next person. She can't. You can't.
Right.
She has 1,000x. That's not exaggerated, especially back when I was asking it. She has 1,000x impact. So it's clearly the way to scale your impact, which is what I really am interested in, isn't just by working harder. You've got to think in terms of how do you achieve residual results? How do you make one decision, one time, that flows to you again and again and again? And one of the things that you can do is you can work with the right people. Yes. You can hire the right people. If you hire one person right, you get 100, maybe 1,000 results will flow to you naturally, day after day after day. And finding the right people is one of my favorite insights. Was discovering that the Warren Buffett uses a rule for who he hires, and I call it now the 3 I's because they're alliterated: integrity, number 1, intelligence, and initiative. And he adds that you've got to get them in the right order because if they don't have integrity, then the other 2 can hurt you.
Right.
But this idea, sorry, I'm now like riffing on this, but Steve Hall is a highly successful entrepreneur friend of mine. So we've got really into essentialism. Has been really helpful in working now on Effortless. He told me a story when he hired basically a CFO, someone who was going to handle, maybe not the CFO, but somebody who was going to handle all their accounting, work in their dealership. It's a car dealership, mostly online car sales.
Right.
And so they were just started to be hugely successful. He has this person and they find a $300,000 accounting error and they think, well, it's probably not great. And she said, oh no, it's just an error. I've just made a mistake and whatever. And they said, okay, well, we're moving so fast. We're doing so much. We'll just prop her up by having somebody kind of monitor her and so on. They knew they couldn't trust her. They knew they doubted the integrity, but they still said, we'll just move forward. And it was just a few years later, she wouldn't take any holidays. That's a red flag.
That's right.
Won't take any holidays. Won't take any moment away of the books. And she was forced to take a holiday. Said, "Leach, you got to get out of here." And then they found that there was a $2 million. It'd grown to $2 million now, and no one ever. She like, she texted everyone. Okay, I quit my job, and no one's ever seen her since. Took the money, ran. No one's seen her since. He said that was the most painful lesson of not hiring right. You see, you hire the right person or the wrong person, you get results residually. It isn't a one-time thing. And so sometimes we make that decision really quickly. Well, we just got to throw a person up this. I got to get some help. I feel frustrated. I feel desperate. Of course we do feel this. But if you get the right person, high integrity, high intelligence, high initiative, that's what he ended up doing. He said, we went through a thorough process then. We brought in executive recruiters. We interviewed everybody deeply. We wanted a really good cultural fit, everything. And they finally found that person. I mean, then he said from that point on, that whole area of the business was so effortless. It all worked. They loved working with him. It was easy. They've sold the business since to a Fortune 500 company. This same employee has been promoted 3 times. I mean, that's the power of finding the right person. And that's a residual result. It's an effortless result. It's worth a little more input to get this repeated perpetual output.
Yeah, and I think what I really like about that story, and a lot of the conversations that I've had on the podcast and really over my career, is that it's not a 1 + 1 = 2 thing, right? If I'm an entrepreneur, I'm slugging it out, I probably know how to do, like, we'll use accounting as a good example. I can get through it.
But when you hire the right person, it gets better, right? It's not just replacing you. It's actually taking it and notching it up. So it's not even just a residual return. It's an exponential return. And I think that like what you really hit on in that story, and then you really hit on in the book, is that like when you think about the effortless life, it's about stacking all of these things up, right? Like you keep finding them and you keep stacking them up. So instead of saying like, here's my one output today, tomorrow I effortless this process, and now it's 2 and 3 and then 4, and then it starts stacking up and it becomes amazing. So going back to the Oprah example, 1,000x contribution is only possible by stacking these effortless, this whole effortless concept. And it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it truly is amazing. And it's so spot on with everybody that I've ever talked to that's done it. They figured it out. And they're like, what do I do? I've got to multiply my vision.
You used a great word there for what it is. I had somebody who helped me do some research for the book and was a terrific, just been a great, his name Jonathan Cullen. It was such a great addition to Team Effortless on this project, made it materially better, and was just delight to work with. I mean, it was those 3 things that we've just been talking about. And he said it's his view that the way he thinks about it is that if you have essentialism plus effortless, it creates a kind of multiplication effect.
Yep.
And I thought he was right about it, but you've just expressed it as well as anyone I've heard express it, that idea of stacking your effortless choices. And it's not because you just want an easy life. I mean, the book isn't that's not even what the book is about at all. It's about how do you go to the next level of contribution and higher contribution, because you have made the other things that already currently consume your life easier and easier. So you can be healthier, get better results, but not without burning out, and actually keep going up the ladder of contribution. I don't mean just success, whatever. I mean contribution. You can make a bigger contribution. If you are consumed and buried with the current activities you have, well, there's no space. It's not about motivation. You want to. I mean, that's who I think the book is for. It's people that are highly engaged, highly capable, but they're on the edge of exhaustion. They want to make a higher contribution, but they've run out of energy. They've run out of space. What do you do then? Well, this is what you can do. I love what you're saying. The idea of effortless stacking, I think, is a great term.
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, like why this just really strikes a chord with me is that we talked about it when you were grilling me earlier, is that I want my legacy to be for my kids. Like,
sorry, it felt like you're grilling.
No, it was great. I loved it, by the way. Is what is possible? Like, what is possible, right? So if I think about and why, like this, I've already taken a lot of these steps, right? Like I told you, I already have a list of 20 things that I've identified just while I was reading the book. I was like, I can do that. If I can take those out of my day-to-day life, right? And let's just say I can make 50 decisions a day. I'm just making up a number. You may actually know what they are. But I can make 50. If I can take 20 of those things out of my life, then what I'm able to do is focus on what really makes me tick and where I'm creative. And that's where things really start to get interesting. And I realized reading your book, both like Essentialism and Effortless now, is like how to put this into play, is that if I can figure out how to give the time that's necessary to the things that are really important and amazing to me, then what will come out of it will be fantastic. And what I've realized, like I said, my midlife crisis here is that I'm realizing that like I'm letting so many days go by that I'm not making changes.
Yeah, and I had a similar painful moment. Well, you actually say all positive things, but I had a slightly painful moment that when I thought what the ratio in my life between the activities I've invested in that will give me a one-time return versus the activities I've done that give me, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say it, 100 times return or 1,000x return in terms of how often you'll get the result back. I just was like, I don't want to spend another minute working on linear. Just get up, you give that hour, you get that result. I want to try and work out how I can change the ratio more and more, where you're taking one-time decision. It makes everything afterwards easier. It opens up possibilities that weren't there before. And then you can, even this question, how can I make it effortless? I think you can apply on so many layers and levels. So in one sense, I love the question because it's like so simple, easy, just ask this question.
Right.
It works when I'm in my office and I look around my office, I want to clean it up, and I see the printer that's been sitting there for 2 weeks, and I think I've got to, I want to get rid of this, but then that's a little overwhelmed bubble of like, but I've got to, do I give it away? Do I sell it? Do I, if I throw it away, where do I throw it? Because then you got to have you got to find a digital
recycling
place. I don't know where that is. Right. All of that happens in like a heartbeat in my head, but it's all enough that I'm like, oh, okay. Come back to that. I've already done that. I've done that cycle 10 times.
Yep.
Every time I look at, yeah. Okay, move on to something else. And then in this time, I'm like, well, how could it be effortless? And as I think that, I look up and I see some workers that are outside, and I'm like, well, maybe they want it. And I pick it up, go out there, ask them, do you want it? Yes. Walk inside, pick it up, give it to them. Within 2 minutes of asking the question, it is done. It is off. It is finished. That's the power of this question. You can apply it in that way, a sort of very small micro level, but I still want to come back sort of where we began, which is if you start with something essential and game changing, if you take something that seems impossible to you, a 10x goal, something remarkable, something that you just said like, man, that's at the edge of my belief of what is even possible, but you feel right about it. So it still has to be essential. It's not big for the sake of being big. It's important, but it's also big, the edge of possibility. And then you just ask the question, what if I could make it effortless? What is an easier way of approaching this? It releases something in us of creativity and possibility. And you said something a moment back, which I love, is my absolute aspiration for the book, is you said there were these 20 things, and you said something like, I can do this. I could do this. And that's what happens when you start rewiring your mind away from harder and harder effort, more and more exhaustion, more and more self-sacrifice, to, well, what if there's just a different way? An easier way? What is an effortless path? There's amazing possibilities, and even in big dramatic things. There's a story I came across. It didn't make it into the book, but exactly. But Seth Godin was counseling an entrepreneur who she'd been trying to pitch for games, like she'd coming up with family games, that kind of thing, to game companies for years, right? She is pushing that boulder up the hill, and she is making almost no progress at all. It pushes up 1 inch, then it falls back down. She is effort. She is hard at this. She wants to do this. So it's she's doing the right things, and he just says, well, what if you're doing it in the wrong way? And his question to her was like, can you push a boulder downhill? Like, what he meant was, is there just a different strategy here? And his suggestion was, look, I'm in the publishing world. Why don't you try and create a game for the publishing industry? Because these game companies don't want you. They don't want to work with you. They don't need you. They don't need people like you. It's not their problem. They've got lots of game ideas. They need something else. They're trying to, scale the games they already have. But then publishing, I think they might love you. And so she changed the strategy, just that hook. And what she did was she created these 52 card pocket packs.
Right.
And it's like 52 things you can do on a rainy day with your kids. 52 cards, but all these things. Well, she sold 5 million sets of these just overnight. She wasn't working harder. She just found a smarter, easier, better path. And this, I just think we so rarely ask the question, we so rarely work out this mindset that is exceedingly low-hanging fruit that we're missing. Because in fact, not only don't we ask the question, we mistrust the easy.
Yep. Yeah, I was having a conversation earlier today with a mentor of mine, and we were talking about old sayings like curiosity killed the cat. You can't teach a dog new tricks. And,
Yeah.
then he kind of extrapolated it to like, when you have kids, you tell them like, don't jump in the puddle. And he's like, all of these things that we learn over our life are kind of pushed down, right? And it's almost like momentum. And he was telling me this story about like, like the kid wants to know what happens when you jump in the puddle.
Mm-hmm.
And, you as a parent, you're like, don't jump in that puddle. You're going to get dirty and messy and all these things. And you kind of push these things down, right? And what it does is it kind of weighs on you in the rest of your life of like, well, this is how this is done. You go to work somewhere and this is how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get bills and this is how you pay them, like there's just so much inertia, I guess, in life. And what I think is really great about your question and kind of like just ties into what he said too is question the question, start over. And just literally ask yourself, what if this could be easy? What would that look like? How would you make this effortless?
There's something you're saying that I'm actually trying to just looking for it because there's a principle in Effortless that we haven't covered that I think is a great sort of note to kind of end with, and it's a story about somebody who wanted to bring human-powered flight into the world. So he has this, for him, it's an essential vision. He feels like it's a really important responsibility. This is like, years and years after the Wright brothers have successfully had, achieved flight. It's only 10 years before Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong will walk on the moon. And he says, basically what he's asking is is to create a bike with wings, something that can be, and he has some specific things you have to achieve in order to win the 50,000 pound prize. It's the Creamer prize. And what you have to do is you have to go around, I think it's 2 mile, figure 8 loop, something like that, around these 2 poles without any engine, without any power. This is the achievement. And he thinks it's going to be doable, but actually, it's not very doable, it seems to be, because for 17 years, nobody achieves it. And, then enter Paul McCready. Paul McCready, he's not exactly an entrepreneur, but he's such a good metaphor for an entrepreneur. He's broke,
right?
First of all. And that's part of the success for him, actually, or part of the key to this is that he has no money. So it's like creativity before capital.
Right.
He has to try and solve this problem. He needs the money for the prize. It's not just the glory of it. He needs that money to pay off this debt. And he also doesn't have any money to get a big team to get sophisticated in what he's doing. The teams that he's competing against, it's the same teams that have been at this for 17 years, all different teams that start and fail, are well-funded. They have big, not just big budgets, but these huge, like beautiful planes, wooden planes, slats and ribbed things, and incredible talent. They've got so much going for them, and they just keep failing. They cannot do it. He comes along. He has no team. He's got his family. He gets his young son, becomes his pilot, and he's sort of staring at this problem one day, and he just has this clear moment, and he realizes, everyone's trying to solve the wrong problem.
Right.
Everyone's trying to solve the wrong problem. What they're doing is they're trying to solve a figure 8 problem, fly around and so on, build a machine that can do this. He said, the problem you have to solve is you have to be able to create a plane that can crash and be repaired cheaply and be back in the air fast. He said, that is actually the problem you have to solve. Everyone's focused on the wrong thing.
Right.
And with that, armed with that, he creates this completely ugly, it's called a Gossamer Albatross, I think is the name of it. And they would, he said, they would go out and fly it, these huge wingspan, inspired by the Condor, these huge wings. So he had that insight too. But this thing was ugly. It was, he said this thing would crash. You'd just stick a broom handle back on the thing,
right? Put
tape on it, and launch it again. The advantage of that was that within one day, he might have 4 crashes, 4 new flights, right, each time learning about what went wrong. And he said that 4 times, he said his competitors would crash, and that might take them 6 months before they could try one more test. And so sometimes in one day, he would get more learning than they had in the totality of the life of their plane. And so it was like, I think, 323 tests of his of this gossamer that they successfully get the full prize, £50,000, and then I think a year, maybe 2 years later, they get the second prize, £100,000, and it's for the first person who can fly across the English Channel just by man-powered or human-powered flight. But underneath that is such an important principle for every entrepreneur, which is that what you want to do is make failing as cheap as possible. And if you can do that, you can accelerate much more quickly because it's less costly, it's less hard to learn. So you want learning-sized mistakes.
Right.
Make it cheap to fail so that you can learn quickly and progress optimally.
I think that's a great way to close it out, because it just focuses on asking the question. And, to your point, is like the inertia of what everybody else is thinking about. It's so easy to get caught up in. And when you ask the question, how can I make this effortless? Your brain actually does something different. And I can attest, like I've had the book for a week, that it's made a change in my life because I've looked at some of these things and said, like, how can I make that effortless? I mean, I did, like I said, I was reading and I was like coming up with things and I was taking notes. And it was one of the first time in my life where I felt like I could do that concurrently with my reading. And that was just, I thought that was so powerful. And, to everybody that's listening, go get the book. It's so worth it. It's such a great story. And then if you haven't read Essentialism, pick that one up, because that tells you where to start, right? Like this is how you prioritize, what's essential. So Greg, thank you. This has been a great conversation. It went in a different direction than I expected early on, and I loved it. So thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Jake.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'd actually love for you to contribute to a future episode. If you have a question you'd like answered, or a topic or a guest to bring on the show, please email me at jake@thelimitedpartner.com. Now I realize there's a lot of lingo that's thrown around on these shows, so I've created a cheat sheet for you with the top 26 terms that come up most often. Head on over to thelimitedpartner.com/lingo for the list. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time.